Good afternoon, and I'm glad to welcome you all for this last session at Slovenia Pavilion at COP28 in collaboration with MCH Global and Digital Art for Climate. We are going to be interviewing Fernando Garibay, super producer and polymath, and now also the founder and CEO of the Garibay Institute that works with soft power and diplomacy for influence. Quite a lot to get your head around, and I'd like to dive right into it. But before I do so, I'd like to put it into context how incredibly important music is for influencing attitudes and shaping cultures. And today, where the world is more globalized, yet more complex than ever, I think this is a lost opportunity that Fernando is in a position to capitalize more than any other. Very few people have heard of Fernando Garibay, but everyone has heard his music. In fact, there isn't any artist, any modern artist that he hasn't worked with practically except Taylor Swift. He produced Lady Gaga's first 3 albums, and when you just think about that alone, it has shaped culture as we know it today. It's the blueprint for the cultural map that we have globally and the political movements. And when you think about that, the music industry has a turnover of 40 billion, which is a small percentage of the gaming industry, for instance. Yet the impact is completely outsized. And this is an opportunity for companies and nations and bringing together also religious groups, because music can express so much more than words. I find, having traveled the world and met a lot of people, that even if you don't have the same understanding of a song or the interpretation of a song, you connect in a feeling of the song. And this is what I want to talk to you about today, Fernando. Your work here specifically in the region. I had the honor of joining you in Davos in the desert a few weeks ago, and you spoke at GITEX on AI and technology and the role of creativity with technology. And today I'd like to explore specifically how you see music being used for soft power and diplomacy.
Yeah, I thank you for that kind intro. I'll start by saying to the table on my background, I've developed artists end to end. It just so happens that these artists were in collaboration with the work that we were doing, were shifting perspectives at scale around the world. And over time, I realized that there's a huge value that's been left on the table for the creative class. And I can trace this back and now set up the table and frame this out in a hope to be simple thread, which is, art was a commodity essentially over the history of time. And it's built out on this economic frame of the first sale doctrine, which is you buy something once and there's an economic return for the artist, the creator. And communities, religious communities throughout history, leadership communities throughout history propagated this forward as a commodity by supporting, by purchasing, and hiring the best talent, Beethoven, Bach, etc. In the early 20th century, we have private capital further propagating this as a commodity. Music, printed sheet music at scale. You have the invention of the phonograph, now being able to sell recorded music. You have moving picture with film industry really blossoming with the help of private capital. Then we look at the mid to late 20th century. You have public capital, Universal Music, Universal Films, etc., now getting their hands on this commodity. And then we have the 21st century where this commodity was valued to zero, thanks to the exchange of Tor and these content sharing platforms. Then we have a band-aid on this issue of economic asymmetry with the subscription model, right? So you can see this thread that this downward return on the value of the creative content and creative output was set to zero, and it still is zero, right? So except for the 0.001% of the creative class that are working. Now, why is this important? Well, on one side is, we have the livelihood of the creatives who inspire and really show us how to see the world, right? What would happen? What would have happened if in history we valued it as a way, art in general, as a way to see ourselves and the world, and that was the primary value proposition. And that's what we set out to find out. And so over my past career of making music for 20 so odd years, I realized that I was not just making pop music, but I was developing a framework for soft power. And then the externalities, which is soft diplomacy. You develop the instrument to tell a story for a community, and then you build the frame out to help get movements across the chasm to scale out in public adoption. And so that's what we built out an institute to do. We work with the premier communities around the world, emerging markets as well, to leverage art, film, and content in general to facilitate a new value proposition for the creative class. Instead of just making music or films and trying to raise capital, we look like trying to tell stories for countries.
But how do you do that in practice? I mean, the stories you shared about recording Lady Gaga's Born This Way on the road, on your laptop, and I feel that album is so inspired. But there was no way you could anticipate just the kind of impact it would have. And did you even think about steering it in a direction then? And how do you think that today, like doing inspired art, will have an impact?
Let me ask you a question. What do you think Born This Way did, the album?
What it did?
For society?
I think it really inspired tolerance. That line, what's the line when they say, I'm on the right track? And give me the line where they...
Born This Way. So it what I've had a career of doing is partnering with artists that were very intentioned on helping humanity, right? And without getting political or taking a side, I think that that's a true example of what I'm saying, that art has this potentiality. It's still locked, right? We're unlocking that potentiality. Now, you saw glimpses of this in the flower power movement with the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel, who were using their art to bring peace to the world.
Yeah, but
and it was left then.
But you
right?
know, like, but how do you direct that power? Like, I want to share this anecdote with you. When Reagan ran for president in '84, I believe, he had his theme song being "Born in the USA," and Bruce Springsteen protested and said, "Oh, this is a protest song against the United States, complaining about the United States." And everyone said, Reagan is so out of touch with the American people. Yeah, he carried 49 states. I don't know who's out of touch.
I can give you a current example of that. I worked on this film alongside with the studio called Angel Studio. Angel Studio is a film studio that is the most talked about film studio in the world right now. One of the reasons they're most talked about is because they released a film called Sound of Freedom. And it's to create awareness to combat child trafficking. Now, who won't get or who can't get behind that, right? But you'd be surprised. But what we did have is, the major presidential campaign nominee currently, I won't mention his name, but it starts with a T, used our music as his partial theme campaign song, right? And then we saw this trend that the music of the film had an impact and was helping presidential candidates around the world and prime ministers advocate for some of their causes. And I saw that. It's like, wow, that's exactly what we hoped for. Now, whether you take a side on left or right, whether it's polarized, I can care less. So long as if it makes noise, it creates impact.
And if it brings people together, it creates impact.
That's right. So we start with, so how we operate and my institute is we work with communities that are disparate. In other words, are not talking to each other. And, again, we thought space was the ultimate unifier. We thought like these other issues, but there's really nothing more effective, in my opinion, and from our case research and our studies, where music is the most effective unifier. And for me, look, I'm a skeptic. I've always been a skeptic because I've always made music. So I thought I was biased until I started looking at the evolutionary history of how our brains developed, right? So music predates linguistics by thousands of years, right? And so let me just follow that thread. If It's baked into our being, our evolutionary being, from our Broca's center of our brain, which are language center of our brain, arguably, and these neural pathway networks that evolved over time to understand language. We understood music first. So music connects with our complete being. And there's this beautiful anecdote of music being the voice of God, well, or the voice of culture, or the voice of people. And that's pretty profound. So now if we can think about this value proposition, music teaches us how to see ourselves, how to see each other, and see the world. What can it do for COP28, COP29, COP30? What can it do for the World Economic Forum? What could it do for our other partners around the world, the religious communities that need a new way to communicate their mission?
I mean, like you're saying, music really transcends politics. It transcends religions. And what I love about Dubai, at least I've heard many say, that you come to this country, you leave your religion and your politics at the door, and everybody comes together here and get along. And I've come to know you as a close friend, as a brother, and all the long discussions we've had together. I don't know where you stand politically, but I know that we feel the same about the world. And I think that's what music does.
Where I stand politically is I love humanity.
Exactly.
Right. And so there's no, I believe in oneness on every aspect of who we are, what we are, from the quantum level to the Newtonian level. We are ultimately all unified, whether we like it or not. But in that thriving version of humanity that I see, it is one where we are understanding and tolerant of each other's perspectives.
Yeah.
Because there's no future in which we have diversity of thought and accelerating communities and growth without those two being mutually exclusive. To simply put it, we must appreciate the diversity of who we are to better accelerate our planet's sustainability and the love for each other.
So I want to go back to when you work with countries and corporations to use music as soft power, how do you approach the mission of what they want to communicate?
Let me be clear, it's not just music. So we tackle on capital markets as we look at partnering with entertainment industry and academia. So it's finance, economics, ultimately, content, entertainment, art, and academia. So art is misunderstood in this way as well. There's scientific art, right? There's scientific artists, there's business artists, and there are traditional creative artists like who do music. So we leverage these instruments to more effectively tell different stories. So I can't get into too much detail on the specifics of it, but I can share some of our ongoing conversations with religious communities and in Saudi and et cetera. And what's interesting is the need to catalyze new ecosystems, the need to support a story that brings us all together, an honest story to more effectively reconcile the differences and converge into something that we can grow together. So we're seeing this in the capital market space. So we're seeing that if you look at a publicly traded company and you add a board that's diverse, your valuation will go up. There's a direct correlative to that, right? We look at UN is a great example of this, right? I heard a great anecdote the other day from someone really extraordinary who mentioned that if it wasn't for the World Economic Forum, for the UN, these global leadership platforms being consistent and meeting every year, we'd have more wars, right? Because the fact that we're having conversations together, getting to know what you're doing, looking at opportunities to trade, looking for opportunities for our children to learn together by sending them off to different countries, that's what brings people together, right? So back to soft power. Soft power is, again, also very nuanced, right? If we bring instruments of the creative business people, instruments of the creative scientific community, and instruments of entertainment, you're looking at catalyzing ecosystems and exporting identity by default as an externality. That's when it's genuine. That's true soft power. After that, then there's the potential for soft diplomacy. That's what happens afterwards. What you do with that growth, has the power to sustain perspectives, thereby being an instrument.
And I guess with any artistry and art, it's about self-expression and promoting local cultures to be able to express what they feel and come together in small communities. And that's quite a contradiction when you look at what you've done, sell some of the greatest selling albums of all time. How do you view that in terms of creating and promoting creativity? It's not just about creating hits, is it?
Well, I would slightly tweak that frame in the way you position that statement. I would say that my career was led by the sheer plainly put, trying to eat, right? So music for me was ultimately the way I saw the world. It was anthropomorphically everything to me. It was every relationship you can think of. So it was a necessity. It was like breathing. So to think about how important music is to someone like me, it was and then I would mirror that sentiment to the rest of the world, how important it is to them. Music saved me from myself. And I think it's that deep core of what music does to people that it's, again, the most important thing when you talk about music. It's how we connect with each other. Music is that bond. It's the fundamental vibration of the world, I think. And that's my philosophical, emotional reaction to that statement. Now, how I reconcile the business aspect, well, that was an externality. I honestly never cared about the economics so long as there was food on the table for my friends and family. And that's it. So now we're in a luxurious position where we have the fundamental economic infrastructure, at least in my life, where I can begin to think academically about these things. And that's why I'm considered a polymath. And I work in the creativity frameworks I teach all around the world, right? Because these are instruments that can change humanity. I feel I have this gift and ability to do that, so I'm going to do that. Very much like I made and collaborated with these extraordinary artists who help get this message out that we should love each other.
I mean, to be a great artist, I guess you have to starve and suffer. And that's a little bit of what I'm hearing from you, that when you started out, it was to get food on the table. And can you really be creative unless you have something that you lack that you need to get out?
Oh, yeah. So that's the theory of whether trauma is the fuel source of the cognitive fuel source for creativity.
I know. I always say if I had been more traumatized as a child, I could have been you.
Look, I'd be doing it. Let me first of all say I'd be doing a huge disjustice to my family that I love very much, and my mentors like Georgia Moroder and who did feed my soul, who did feed me in every single way. But what I mean by that is music is so profound that you don't realize up until you have success that you don't need the success to prove out your worthiness, right? And that's ultimately what music came for me. It's always trying to essentially prove this dynamic of understanding myself and where I fit in the world. So that's my hope, is that power of unification with yourself, the reconciliation of who you are and what you do with the world is where you start. So that at scale is what we're trying to do. And that's what I've always done with the music, right? With the artists that I worked with. It's we're just trying to show you a version of yourself, right? And if you can see that, and that's what music does. It's like, so the majority of the world has this it's a challenge to see yourself because you can't put a mirror to your brain. Right? But what you can do is watch a beautiful film that might show you a different side of humanity. It might put on a song from Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, who would show you how to think beyond this planet. Right? So that's what the most important thing out of this space that I get.
So what are you seeing in the region now with Arab music, and how do you wish to be working with the region?
Well, I think the obvious is can we bring, well, I just follow what we can learn from K-pop, for example, right? To better answer that question. K-pop taught us how to take Western practices and use lean manufacturing to optimize its contagion and its scale effects, right? And then we look at other communities like Mexico, who have the #1 artist in the world right now, Peso Pluma, which is amazing because I'm Mexican and I'm very proud. And you see how, again, music scales, and what does that mean here? Well, I think that the same thing can happen here. I'm not the only one who thinks this, obviously. But what I think is, in order to do it effectively, how to create a new genre, it's always been here, not new, but new to the world, is to catalyze ecosystems and do this knowledge transfer where you bring the best of the West and East, right? So top down, macro, and then you raise that artistic amplitude, right? And then converge in the middle, right? So top down, bottom up approach to catalyzing Arab pop music. That's what we're looking at.
So for Arab pop to become the new K-pop, do you think it is a matter of the skills to be influenced from the outside and what you can bring to the table? Is it distribution? I mean, I imagine when you look at a lot of genres, to be blunt, it's not necessarily the most talented artists that become famous now more than ever, I would say.
It's a complexity question, right? That's why we say catalyze ecosystems. It's everyone involved. It is, but what I'll tell you about the insights of this is there have been producers and songwriters and artists have been working in their bedrooms. It just so happens now they have the opportunity to show that to the world. Unfortunately, the challenge is now the West has had 150 years in the space of creating content, right?
Well,
Longer,
distribution is really key. And I mean, you were mentioning the record labels. There used to be 5, I guess, and now there are even fewer. And the concentration of the record labels is greater and greater. At the same time, getting distribution on Spotify is easier than ever. Anyone can get a global audience.
Yes, but if you look at the Spotify artist, if you like who's top 100, 75% are still major labels. Okay, here's why. I mean. Here's why, and then I'll unlock the secrets to this. It's not that you can't do it yourself. You can do it yourself, but do you have the right vendors?
But this is exactly what I'm getting at.
Everything's outsourced. Like let me put it this way. So the right vendors, right? The right marketing team, everything's outsourced now. Guess who has the right vendors?
The record labels are still the gatekeepers.
No, I also have the right vendors. That's my point. To do effective knowledge transfer and to catalyze an ecosystem, you must have the network, the know-how, the framework, and the people. And that's what we're capable of doing. So we're going to lend our services to the Middle East as a whole. And I can't say who are, I can be very clear about our partners, but their intentions are to support and catalyze the music that's about to come out from the Middle East.
And we are about to announce a global music initiative tomorrow. Is there anything you can tease?
Well, I think, again, it's to bring the world together, like at scale, right? We like big projects, and used to be I was developing pop stars for the biggest label on the planet. Now we're going to develop extraordinary art for the most prolific communities around the planet to bring us together.
Thank you, Fernando. Are there any questions?
My practical question would be, first, congratulations to the great work that you're doing. But my practical question is, we have tomorrow at the Digital Innovation Pavilion several activities. Exactly this topic, how do we inspire the world and how do we build a movement with the power of music? We have had an initiative already, a Global Challenges Youth Music Contest in the year 2012 for the Rio+20 conference in Rio de Janeiro. There we've seen that young people, this music approach resonates with young people very much. So when I was attending a conference of youth for the UN Alliance of Civilizations, young people, about 100, were asked, what are the 3 main topics in words that in their lives, and at least 1/3 of them said mentioned music among the 3 most important things in their lives. So for me, this was really quite interesting. And anyway, we have tomorrow at 10:30 in the Blue Zone, Digital Innovation Pavilion, a workshop about digital collectibles and NFTs, how this kind of approach can help creators, creative economy, purpose economy, but also climate action empowerment. So this is the technological side. The second workshop is at 12 o'clock about our plans for the Digital Art for Climate Art and Music contest, which we are launching tomorrow. And we are planning a Glotcha Co-Creation Festival last week of May and first week of May, and then including a small edutainment show, and then in September in New York, in the context of the UN Summit of the Future, a bigger edutainment activity. And I wanted to ask you whether you would be available to join us, because we would really like to have you as an advisor to our work, but also as a partner, so that we create synergies. Congratulations to your work. It's really amazing what you've done, but just also the invitation for the event tomorrow, that we strengthen the synergies between our work.
I would be honored. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think ultimately right now it's again, this is the first starter, right? If this inspires you, Miro, to now want to get involved, that's the appetite that I'm looking for, right? And we encourage everyone here to get involved.
Yeah, because you said you are helping musicians, but I think it's good if you help also organizations.
That's right. That's the whole focus here, right? That's why we're here at the UN and COP28. It's global leaders. It's communities that have the ability to create impact at scale.
Wow. At 2:30 tomorrow, there's also a press conference in the Blue Zone, in the press conference room 2, and I hope to have everyone joining, and we will share opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor.
Hey, yeah, my question would be on the idea of bringing people together for a large shared emotional experience with art to make the world a better place is an empowering statement, but it's also somewhat of a vague statement. There is a question of a for what, make the world better, how and for what, and I think it presses on. I had a conversation with a guy named Jack Healy, who was the former CEO of Amnesty International, and he led the Conspiracy for Hope tour. And his conundrum that he ran into was, you get all these people together and they have this deep moved experience, and then when it ends and they disperses, they're not sure where to place that emotion and what to actually do. And so I guess that also might be weeding on you having to explain more of, what your project is that you're going to be launching on. So, maybe it's you can't talk about it enough. But
the vague has the word vague has a proximity in which is spectrum, so it's hard to define the actual definitives that would lead you to that framing of that statement. But I would say that given the bandwidth of our time, and I can give you a short answer to that. And the short answer to your statement would be, in order to effectively rally and have a community of global leadership to converge to a point of action, you would need to have your key objectives identified and the goal. If the goal is unity, you must have strategic steps, key steps to get you to that point. One of these key steps were step number 1, identify a massive global project, and that's what we're doing. Step number 2, unify, get limbic engagement, and then have the ability to create a limbic transfer in that space. And then the next objective would be to define the actionables. Right? And once you define the actionables, you then spearhead and brainstorm and give key ownership to heads of state that want to get involved in this special project. That's where we're at. So our points are very clear. If I have more bandwidth and ample time and can take more of your time, I would do that. But that's as clear as I can be right now, given our context. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Fernando. It's been an honor.